Hello, Acceleration Nation. I am excited to have on the SYCK Career Podcast today, Maya Grossman. I learned about Maya first from a good friend of mine who's been on another SYCK podcast, Blaine Waga, when I was having coffee with her in Lisbon, Portugal. And I was talking about career coaching, and she's like, "You got to check out this woman, Maya Grossman. She's killing it on LinkedIn." And so I started following Maya's stuff and I started reading it. And I was like, well, Maya has some great stuff to say. So I reached out to Maya on LinkedIn coldly. I think probably being effusive with my praise for your post. I forget exactly how I reached out. You were kind enough to reply back and we've gotten to know each other. And I always like getting to know other people in the industry who are helping to accelerate people's careers with actionable insight. So with that, before I just continue to hog this whole show, Maya, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the SYCK Career Podcast audience here.
Well, thank you for the intro, Alan, and I'm so excited to be here. So, hi, I'm Maya Grossman. I'm a best-selling author, 2 times VP of Marketing, and an employee who was promoted 10 times in 15 years. And now I'm also the CEO and founder of Maya Grossman Consulting, where I help high achievers make quantum leaps in their careers, earn high six figures, and build a career they actually enjoy.
That is awesome. It sounds like you've done this before because you had your elevator pitch nailed down.
Well, that's exactly what you need to do, right?
Exactly. And the thing that really impresses me, and I know you put this in your profile and you talk about this, is those 10 promotions over 15 years. So for me in my career, I think I've only been promoted like 4 times or so, maybe 5. How the hell did you get promoted 10 times?
Well, first of all, 4 or 5 promotions are awesome. I don't think that's something to be discounted. And the 10 promotions in 15 years, that's a combination of strategy, working on my reputation, having the right advocates, and making really tough decisions like knowing when to leave if you don't actually get what you want so that you can create your own opportunities.
Awesome. And of all those things, I have found the advocacy part to be the most valuable, at least in my history. So let's dig in there first. Talk about what an advocate is and how they may differ from what people call mentors.
Yeah. So when I talk about getting a promotion, I usually narrow it down to 5 different things that you need. And it's called the startup module. And basically, you're going to work on strategy, you're going to have advocates, you're going to work on your reputation, you're going to make sure that you have the right achievements. And lastly, you're going to make a business case for yourself. And the advocates part is crucial. You can have everything else. And if you don't have the right people vouching for you, it's going to be really difficult. And here's why. Most people think a promotion is a reward for doing their job well. So if they just do their work, they're going to get promoted. That's not how it works. If you do the same thing at your level, you're not demonstrating that you're ready for the next level in your career. So the only way to get promoted is actually to get other people to trust that you have the ability to operate at the next level. And at the end of the day, people promote people. When your promotion is going to be decided, you're not going to be in the room. And a bunch of other people, your advocates, your stakeholders, are going to be there. And you want them to go to bat for you. You want them to be excited to promote you. And you need to work on that. It's not going to happen by mistake. You actually have to build a relationship with them. And the way that you find those advocates, you're going to ask yourself, who has the power to decide on my promotion? Who has the power to stop it? And who are the people that are probably going to whisper in my manager's ear? Because your manager is going to be the most important stakeholder. So you need to know who they go to for advice. And if you find those people, and it's not like 20 or a million, it's 5 people usually. If you find those advocates and you build a relationship with them, you're going to be so much more likely to get promoted no matter how many hours you work.
Yeah. And I know you and I have had similar background or some overlapping background. You were at Google for a while. I think you were at Microsoft for a bit as well. The promotions that I've been part of, the promotion decisions have often, those conversations in those rooms where you're trying to influence often occur through calibration sessions. Is that
Mhm.
similar? Is that similar to your experience? And if so, can you explain a little bit about what goes on in that room that you're trying to influence?
Yeah, so with the bigger companies, yes, definitely. There are usually conversations either once or twice a year about performance reviews and as a result, also promotions. I would say that I'm a huge believer in not tying yourself to a promotion cycle. So whenever you're ready, whenever you feel like it's time, I would definitely go for it. It's not as easy, but it is possible. But here's the problem, because most people assume that getting a promotion is doing their job well, they settle for the bare minimum. They literally do what they have to do to survive, which kind of puts them in the middle. So when you look at the calibration graph, you want to be at the right side of it where people are over delivering and actually surpassing expectations. Why? Because on average, only 9% of people get a promotion. If you want to give yourself the best chance, step number one is to actually be good at your job. You don't have to be the best, but you
Mm-hmm.
definitely need to deliver and sometimes over deliver on your day job before you demonstrate you're ready for the next level.
Yeah. Um, totally. You need to have some credibility there. Then some of that is advocating for yourself and getting those advocates. Going back to those advocates, so you're trying to develop advocates and earn advocates that will talk on your behalf in this room, whether it's a real room or a virtual room or some sort of place where you are not invited into. How can you, as someone who is trying to be in that 9%, the 9% that get promoted, how can you find out who are the right people that actually have influence and are the right people that can potentially advocate for you and your promotion?
Yeah, so it's definitely going to differ from company to company. With the really small companies, it's really easy. It's usually your manager's manager, and maybe HR. When it comes to the bigger companies, it's usually a committee. So you really want to understand who might be there. Maybe you can rely on past experiences. You can ask people around you who is usually going to be on that committee. But first and foremost, you need to get your manager and your manager's manager on the list. Those are the two people guaranteed to be responsible for your
Yes.
promotion. So that's step number one. And when you have them, you might actually use that relationship to figure out who else might be involved. Now, it's not necessarily just the people in the room, but if you can actually reach out to people who your manager trusts, they're going to be able to make sure that your manager is going to be on board. And once
Yes.
again, your manager is the one person who can make or break your promotion. If you do not have them on your side, this promotion is not happening.
That's a great point. And I've had managers that have been on my side, and it's been a easier process, not easy, but easier process to get that promotion through. I think that is a prerequisite. If you don't have your manager's support, I have never seen anyone get, well, maybe one time when you had people above advocating and kind of uh, um, circumventing the manager's power. But pretty much, if you don't have your manager's support, it's a non-starter typically. If you're someone in a situation where you don't have your manager's support, how do you earn that support? Can it be earned, or is it something that maybe you need to evaluate of like, hey, maybe I need to get out of this situation?
Yeah, I definitely think this is something you need to evaluate. I mean, sometimes if you're just starting to build a relationship, some people take a little bit more time. So maybe, if you haven't built that trust with your manager, you need to learn to get to know them on a personal level. You need to understand what their goals are, and you need to try and align your work with their success.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can build trust. And a lot of times, and I'm going to be very honest, a lot of people in management positions should not be managers because they don't know how to be managers. They're a little bit scared. They're intimidated by people who take initiative and, try to think differently. What I tell to people who are in this situation is that the best way I know to build trust with managers who are a little bit intimidated is to over communicate. The reason they're a little bit scared is because they don't know what to expect. So if you over communicate, if you share your thought process, if instead of completing a project and coming to them, you actually share with them every step of the way and get their opinion, I find that often it will actually get them to trust you. Now, this is incredible if you're able to do that, but I'll be very honest, if nothing works and your manager is not going to support your promotion, you have a few options. You can stick around, which I do not recommend. You can find how you can level up, but with another team within the same organization, because it's easier to move within the same company. And if none of that work, it's time to think about how you're going to level up externally.
I think that's a great point. So if you don't have that advocacy, or I don't know if you call it advocacy for your manager, it is advocacy because they are essentially putting their neck on the line to advocate for your promotion. If you don't have that advocacy, figure out how to get that support of your manager. Or if that's not possible, stop banging your head against a wall and figure out that there's probably a path of less resistance outside, either within the company or outside the company. I often find managers, to your point, to be poor in general. Like the median manager is probably poor. like if you look at the continuum of managers, a lot of managers get into management because they were good individual contributors. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're good managers. If you look at Michael Jordan, he was one of the best basketball players of all time. And when he became the coach and the GM, he really sucked. That happens with managers too. And I find managers sometimes are afraid of having difficult conversations. So they may not tell you directly that I'm not going to support you for a promotion, but they might be like, oh, not this time, not this time, maybe next time, not this time. And so they're not telling you that, hey, this ain't going to happen, but they're kind of pulling you along. How do you know as an individual when you can potentially get promoted within this situation, or when the manager's blowing smoke up your tush?
Yeah, well, when I teach people how to work towards a promotion, one of the first thing we talk about is how to mitigate risk, because the last thing we want is for you to spend 6 to 8 months working your butt off, not getting the results that you want. And one of those signals is whether or not your manager is going to support you. So what I usually recommend is to bring up a promotion, and you can frame it as career growth conversations. The goal is not for you to say, hey, I want a promotion now, but rather, hey, I'm thinking about growing my career. I want to start working on a promotion. So in the next cycle or the one after that, I can actually apply. And if you get resistance, if you get pushbacks, you really need to understand where it's coming from. So if your manager says, you know what, I don't think you're ready, this is actually really great, because if they think you're not ready, and you already know that you're not ready, you're aligned. Perfect. Now you need to understand the details of why you're not ready. This is when you circle back and you ask, well, you know what? I actually agree. Can you help me figure out what are the 5 things I need to work on in order to qualify myself for this promotion? And you get specific. You get real KPIs so that when the time comes, success is not negotiable. If you're going to check all the boxes that you and your manager both agreed on, you're going to get the promotion. Now, another pushback can be, this is not the right time. This is not the right time is usually, I'm too lazy. I don't want to spend time coaching you, unfortunately. Or there's something going on with the company that I can't tell you about. So once again, you want to dig a little bit deeper and ask your manager, well, if now is not the right time, when would be a good time? When do you think we can have this conversation again? And try to get a concrete answer. And you can also get really specific and say, hey, is there something going on with the company that I should know about? Is there a hiring freeze? Do we have a problem with headcount? I really want to understand why I can't get this promotion. And lastly, if someone says, well, we're probably not going to have the headcount, once again, double down. Is this because there's really no budget and this is a sign for you to leave because they're not going to promote you probably in the next 6 to 8 months? Or is this because you don't see a business need for me to level up? The first, there's not a lot you can do, you're going to leave. The second, you can actually come up with a business justification for your promotion. You can demonstrate how leveling up will allow you to do more and make a bigger contribution and actually convince them to give you the promotion. That's how you push back.
I love your direct approach. I have tried that in the past. It hasn't always worked well for me. It seems to come very naturally for you. Um, what if people have challenges having that conversation with their manager, or if their manager is uncomfortable being very direct in the conversation, which I've seen more the latter than the former. I've actually seen lots of, anyway, on both sides, for people that are a little uncomfortable having that very direct and open conversation. What advice do you have for them of how to approach that conversation? And then on the second point, what happens when smoke is blown up your tush because they are not being direct with you?
Okay, so let's answer the first question first.
First question is, you're very comfortable with this. You've had lots of these conversations in your career. You've got promoted 10 times. I'm guessing there was times that you have not got promoted and you left the situation. So you're very comfortable with these conversations. For someone that is a little less comfortable with having that conversation with their manager, what sort of tips or advice do you generally offer people? Because that's a gutsy conversation to have with your superior.
Yeah, I'm going to be very honest. If you want to grow your career, you're going to have uncomfortable conversations. You're going to have to get used to it. You're going to have to practice it, even though you don't really like it. I was terrified the first time I negotiated an offer because it was a really tough conversation. I did not want to do it. I pushed back, but I was lucky enough to have a partner who kicked my butt on the other side and said, "What's the worst that can happen?" Right? You miss 100% of the chances you don't take. You already have the offer. Negotiate. Worst case, they'll say no. You'll settle for what you have right now. And I ended up doing that, even though I was scared. And guess what? They gave me exactly what I asked for, which was basically an indication that I could have asked for about 30% more, because that's how much they could have stretched further. But it gave me the confidence. It made me realize this is what happens when you have tough conversations. And when I teach people how to manage their career, I have this very specific description. I say, you need to think about your career like you're the CEO of a one-person company. And when you're the CEO of the company, everything is your responsibility. So if you want to get a promotion, it's your job. You need to create the product, which is you. You need to do the marketing and the sales, but you're also going to reap the rewards. So when it comes to having tough conversations, practice. Literally practice. I would I would do it with my husband, but now it's easier. You can just open up a Zoom and just record yourself and practice having those conversations. Ask yourself, what are the pushbacks? What objections, is my manager going to have? And practice giving them answers. It's not going to be perfect. Maybe it's not going to work the first time around, but the more you do that, the more you learn to get uncomfortable, the more that you're going to gain eventually.
Yeah. So you've had lots of successful conversations that have led to positive outcomes for you. Can you talk about some of the more challenging conversations either you've had or your clients have had? Like, what is that biggest risk? Because to your point, like in my perspective, big deal. If you have the conversation, doesn't work out, at least you get some more insight. But what's like, is there a war story that you have or a client without revealing their name? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you have this conversation with your leader?
Well, to be fair, I've never had anyone, for example, lose their job over a tough conversation. That never happened. I do think that sometimes they're just very disappointed. When they're disappointed, they don't get what they want. They become demotivated. They stop doing the work that they actually need to do to get a promotion. And they kind of get stuck in this limbo situation of, I hate it, but I don't want to leave. And it's just such a waste of time. It's your career. No one is forcing you to stay there. You can make different choices. Not to mention, sometimes rejection is actually redirection. Not every time I applied for a promotion, I got it. But instead of saying, oh no, my manager hates me, it's never going to happen, I actually doubled down. I asked, why didn't I get this promotion? What can I do next time? Between now and the next cycle, what do I need to do to prove that I'm ready for this promotion? And you know what? If you're not getting the clear answer from your manager, go talk to people who have the job you want to have, both internally and externally, because they will tell you exactly what it takes. And then you're going to do the work. And if you're not going to get promoted within your company, at least you'll have the skills and the experiences you need to level up externally.
I love your approach, Maya, and I'm going to read a quote from your LinkedIn profile, which specifically resonates with me. You said, "I stopped waiting and hoping someone will help me grow my career and took control. I decided what I wanted my career to look like, and I started making my dream a reality." So I love that proactive nature of yourself. I find a lot of people sitting by, waiting to get promoted, thinking that their great work will get noticed. I don't think that's the right course of action. And like, how do you balance being proactive and speaking on your behalf and advocating on your behalf and gaining advocacy versus not being seen as political or looking like in a negative way? Like, how do you balance that? Or is there no harm in advocating for yourself?
Oh, advocating for yourself is a must. That's one of the things that I was so resistant to for so long in my career because I thought it's going to make me look greedy and salesy. And when you work for the bigger companies, every single day there's an email about a campaign or a project and how amazing it was. And then there's a shout out for like 500 people. And at some point, everyone stops reading those emails and they become completely irrelevant. So the way I think about it, once again, you don't need to be a rock star. This is not about networking with everyone on the planet. This is about identifying the few people, the small group or team that is going to be very important for your career, that can actually have an impact on whether or not you get promoted, and making sure that they know who you are and what you can do. Now, there are actually a couple of ways I do this without feeling salesy because I'm an introvert. I actually don't like being in, big groups. I don't like to shout out from the rooftop like, look at me. I feel very embarrassed, which is why I came up with different ways to do it. And I'm going to walk you through two of them. The first one is about your manager. How do you advocate for yourself with your manager on an ongoing basis without ever having to think about it? And it's a tiny change that makes a huge difference. So when you have your one-on-one with your manager, most people treat it like a complaining session. They come to it and it's like, here's what's wrong, here's what's not working, I need your help, I need resources, blah, blah, blah. If you just flip the script and you start with, here are the 3 things that worked really well this week, here's what my team have achieved, you are actually creating positive priming with your manager. This is what they're going to remember. This is what's going to influence their mood. They're going to be more likely to help you. And it's going to stick in their mind that you are the person who gets shit done. Tiny change, massive impact. Every single week, start with what you have achieved and how you are successful. Then go and complain about anything that you want. Step number 2, do what I call invisible PR. So I don't like talking about myself necessarily, not in the workplace. So what I have figured out is that if I stop working in silo and I start working collaboratively, people will be more interested in my work. And here's what I mean. You're not going to delegate work. You're still going to do the work yourself. But if for your next project, you're going to ask yourself, who is one advocate, one of the people I really need on my side, who can give me advice? Maybe they are a subject matter expert. Maybe they came from the industry, whatever it is. You're going to create a frame of the plan that you think you're going to follow, and you're going to go to them. You're going to talk to them for 30 minutes and just ask for feedback. That's all you're doing. They don't need to do any work. Just give feedback. And here's why. Because now they're involved. Now they have a stake in your success because you're going to follow their advice. You're going to incorporate their recommendations in your plan. So every time that you send an update, they actually are going to care. When you tell them about the milestones, when you tell them that the project was a success, they're going to give a damn because they were part of it and it's their name tied to this project. So by making a tiny change in how you work, you're going to make these people more involved. You're going to make sure they know what you're doing and they're going to be on your side.
That's some sick advice. So the first one, Positive priming, like talking like positively about your stuff with your manager. Secondly, gaining this advocacy through collaboration with stakeholders and not necessarily asking them, hey, can you say put in a good word with my boss? But just by having having that influence and having that impact with these cross-functional stakeholders, you know that that surround sound will be getting back to your manager's ears,
Yep,
or
exactly.
in the room when the conversations occur. Cool. So I have a general philosophy. I call it the 2-year rule. And the basis of this was when I was at American Express. They showed us a graph as managers that within the first 6 months, your employee is kind of a negative value to the organization because they're learning, they're absorbing things, but they're not providing value to the company. Then the next 6 months, they start to return some value. And then it's like break even for the organization or the team. And your goal as a manager is to try to keep them as they weren't saying it this obviously, but it was pretty much the conclusion that I interpreted. Your goal as a manager is to keep them on the team and engaged as long as possible after that year, because then they are just returning positive value for the organization and the team. On the flip side, from the employee's perspective, why do you want to have your value extracted by the company or the team? So I generally tell people within 2 years, you should be going up in terms of promotion, or if you hit a wall there, over in terms of getting some sort of and I think you alluded to this also, getting some sort of cross-functional expertise or finding opportunities internally. Or if you're not getting either of those, get out and find something external. So I came up with a 2-year. I don't know if you have any. Well, first off, I'd love your perspective on the 2-year up, out, or over rule. And if you have any different framework, like you got promoted really quickly. You've gotten promoted 10 times in 15 years, every 18 months on average. So you blow my two-year rule out of the water. But just love your reflection on the 2-year rule, and if you have any guidance with your clients that you work with, and how quickly they should be thinking about moving up or getting more opportunity.
Yeah, I have a bit of an issue with career ladders because they are based on averages, and most of the people I work with are not average. So just because it should take, I think, 5 to 7 years to level up into a manager role doesn't mean you need to wait 5 to 7 years. And I like the general direction you're going with. I just wouldn't put a timestamp on it, because when you tell yourself, I need to wait 2 years before I'm going to make a decision, if you're ready to level up a year in, you're going to hold yourself from actually taking action. So I usually try not to put a timestamp on it. And I try to make sure that you're either moving towards your long-term career goal. So if you have a vision, if you have a dream, for me, for years, I wanted to be a CMO of a Silicon Valley startup. I lived in Israel. I wasn't an executive. I was nowhere near that dream, but I kept pursuing it for 7 years until I made it a reality. So every decision I made was whether or not this is going to get me closer to that CMO role. So for example, when I worked for Microsoft, I had an opportunity to either level up internally or go work for a startup. Now, leveling it up internally was going to give me a much nicer comp. However, it wasn't going to get me closer to that CMO role. So I actually left to go work for a startup and got my VP title a year later instead of probably 5 to 7 years within Microsoft. So I like to follow my long-term goal and make decisions based on whether or not it's going to get me closer to that goal.
And on that point, how do you think about promotions versus compensation? And sometimes they're highly correlated. Usually you get promoted, usually get more compensation. Sounds like perhaps in that situation that you're alluding to, you might have had the opportunity to get more compensation moving up within Microsoft rather than have this opportunity to have more scope at a startup. I don't know if that was a situation with you, but how do you think about promotion and compensation and when you need to decide one versus the other? And sometimes you do have to make that decision. And what advice do you have for people to think through that?
In general, the more value you add, the more valuable you become. So if you're doing valuable work, you should be compensated for it, period. However, in different seasons in our lives, we optimize for different things. When I was really early in my career, I had to pay my rent. That was the first time I was living on my own. The only thing I cared about was my paycheck. 10 years later, I could actually compromise on compensation because what mattered to me was the career progression. I'll go even further. I was speaking to a client recently who has been doing incredible work. Her manager actually acknowledged that she was doing next level work, but they couldn't promote her. It's a tiny company, no budget, no justification to give her a raise. And she loved the company, but she decided she was going to leave. And I told her, before you leave, have a conversation with your manager. They have literally told you, you are doing next level work. If they can't give you the compensation, get the title. Because if you get the title, when you go out and you start looking for a new job, you're starting from that level. And she had the tough conversation and she got the title. And now she's looking for a job that is automatically going to promote her. So all of the hard work she did not go to waste. So it's really about what you're optimizing for and asking for what you actually want.
So the title may not come with immediate payoff, but it gives you better brand recognition. It helps you to get additional compensation and responsibility down the road.
Yeah, I mean, again, if this is your goal, if your goal is solely about your compensation, there are different ways to do that. You can work for the bigger companies. You don't necessarily have to level up all the way, and you'll get incredible compensation. But if your dream is to make a bigger impact, if you want to keep leveling up, if you want more responsibility, then the question is not how much they're going to pay me. The question is always, how am I going to get closer to my goals? Now, having said that, I'm not going to do work for free, not at this point in my career, but you definitely have a little bit of room for negotiation. You don't have to have the top compensation. You can have enough for what you need and make the best of the promotion, of the added responsibility, of the title, so that you can actually move towards your end goal.
And that's an interesting question. So while I was at Google and Facebook, everyone wanted to get promoted. And to your point about the 9% rate, I think we promoted people about 10%, 10 to 15% of people got promoted every 6 months while I was at those organizations. So about 20% in a year. So I think they overly promoted compared to like the industry averages. But people, like, I would always even though I was only able to promote 10% of people per cycle, there were probably 20 or 25% of people that on my team that wanted to get promoted. And I couldn't promote them all as a manager. I was always curious about why they wanted to get promoted. People have different reasons for getting promoted. As you speak to your clients, as you've thought about it in your career, what are some of the big driving reasons that people want to get promoted? Like, we talked about money. So money is like an obvious one, but what are some other reasons that why you advise people that they should be aiming for this promotion and this recognition?
I think reasons are going to be very personal, but what I see a lot with my clients, most of them are super ambitious, high achievers. They want to make a bigger impact. They want to get closer to decision making. They want to learn. They want to grow. They actually enjoy the additional challenges. And people make the mistake of thinking that it's going to be about working 24/7. It's about putting in more hours, but it's not. When you focus on making an impact, when you focus on the outcomes, not the outputs, when you work smarter, you don't need to put in that much more time when you level up, when you want to do more, when you have a bigger impact. For me, my guiding source have always been fulfillment. I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel accomplished. I wanted to feel that my work matters. And I wanted to influence other people and help them feel the same. And that's what's driving me now, even as a coach. I want to make an impact on the world. I want to help 1 million people have a much happier and healthier career and do it on their terms. So I think there are a lot of different reasons. Definitely compensation. People want to have comfortable lives, and I completely understand it. But I think the other half is looking for that fulfillment and excitement and challenge as they grow.
Great, Maya. That's really informative. So I have two more questions for you as we're wrapping this up. Number one, you dropped lots of great advice, but if you had one final piece of SYCK advice to share with my audience here, share it.
I think the most important thing to remember, to understand, and to believe is that you're in control of your own career. No one else,
Yes.
Not your manager, not a company. You are the CEO of your own career, and you have the power to make anything a reality, but you have to get in the driver's seat. That's the only way that it's going to work. So if people take anything from this conversation, take this. You're in charge. You can make it happen, but you need to do the work.
Awesome. And then my last question for you. Well, actually, I'm lying to you. There'll be two more. But the next to last question is, where can people find you? If like you've dropped so many words of wisdom here, people should, well, I have some advice on where they can find you, but you tell my audience where they can find Maya Grossman.
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, Maya Grossman, or you can go to mayagrossman.com. And I do have a free newsletter where I share, very similar to what we talked about today, I share career advice, super practical, every week. So people can feel free to subscribe and get that advice right into their inbox.
Great. And then honestly, the final question, you shared lots of great insights here. We had a great conversation. What should we name this podcast? What should we title this episode?
How to become the CEO of your career and consistently level up.
Nice. I like it. We're going to use it. Well, thank you so much, Maya, for your time. Thanks for all the posts that you do on LinkedIn. I think I'm signed up for your newsletter. I get so many. I will make sure that I'm signed up for your newsletter if I am not. And thanks for all you do. Thanks for helping people take charge of their career and become the CEO of their career. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.